say it again so that I'm on audio. Sorry, guys. All right. Thursday, December 15th, 2022, Zoning Advisory Committee is called to order at 5:33 p.m. We will start with roll call, item 1.02. Tyler?
Happy holidays, everyone. Shannon Coley.
Here.
Polly Boardman.
Present.
Kristen DeHaan.
Present.
Tyler Rogers. Present. Christine Hull.
Present.
Christy Essa. Natalie Geisels. Adriana Publico.
Here.
Lauren Rushing.
Present.
Amy Howe. Darren Fleck. Brooke Snyder. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is a quorum.
Woo! That felt a little precarious earlier. Okay. Item 2.01, approval of minutes of the November 17th meeting. This item is for possible action. Did anybody have any changes? Nope. These are very detailed notes. Side note, Martha, thank you. She even put screenshots in them, guys. Like, this is really impressive. Thank you. All right. Well, if there are no changes, I will take a motion to approve the minutes.
I always move.
Lauren Rushing, motion to approve.
Polly Boardman, second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Motion passes. Minutes are approved. Neil, you're making me nervous because you're in here. I'm like, oh God, am I doing this right? No, it's fine. Oh, great. That's good. Good. Okay. And here's our big item and why we are meeting in December when we normally don't. We are looking at item 2.02, information, discussion, and possible action to recommend to the Board of Trustees proposed enrollment zone adjustments for the 23-24 school year, potentially impacting the following schools: Desert Heights Elementary, Lemon Valley Elementary, Alice Smith Elementary, and Stead Elementary. Again, this item is for possible action. Adam Searcy, the floor is yours.
Thanks, you guys. Good evening. Adam Searcy, for the record, School District Operations. I appreciate you highlighting this agenda item. We've talked about this a couple of times at a couple different meetings and have learned a lot and made relatively few adjustments or additions to the content, but I think we all understand the situation and the opportunity a little bit better, and thus have agendized it for possible action and with a recommendation for implementation next school year. So that's the way it's teed up, but let's dive in and get to the discussion part. I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Adam, did you mean next school year, 23-24?
That's the way it's
Okay.
proposed.
All right.
Yep.
Sorry, thank you.
Of course. So just looking at the current enrollment boundaries, of course, you have the elementary in the blue outline. The colors represent the middle school boundaries, and the dark line is the high school boundary. Really, we're focused again on these 4 elementary schools, all matriculating up to O'Brien Middle School. And this red star represents a 8-acre parcel that the school district owns currently that is master planned for elementary school in the future, but well beyond the 5 and possibly even 10-year horizon. So not really something we're focused on the nearer term for interim overcrowding relief. Just a little context, there's been a variety of zoning advisory committee actions in this area over the past several years, more so stemming from the opening of the larger O'Brien and the opening of the Michael Inskeep Elementary up in Cold Springs. So we wanted to just put this on the record for folks that are like, wasn't I just rezoned like last year or the year before? Yes, there has been activity up in this area, but none of the areas under consideration for rezoning here this evening were a part of these rezoning actions recently. So just a note, this is the same information that we saw last month. These are the existing enrollments and capacity utilization. So you can really see the imbalance between the 4 schools in question, and that's really the opportunity that we think is before us to try and better distribute that. And we've also talked quite a bit about special programs and particular variances into and from the enrollment zones at each of these 4 schools. So this is also the same data that we saw last month. There are a few more students enrolled in Desert Heights than the district average, but by and large, these are not tremendous outliers. We'll talk more about this, and we've learned more, I know, from your outreach to these schools. This also is the same slide we saw last month. At minimum, acknowledging the special programs that are located at all of these schools, the important role that they play for those students, but also the impacts to classroom availability versus capacity. Basically, with lower student-teacher ratios at some of these special programs, 8, 10, 15 students in a classroom, 100% occupying that classroom, but maybe not utilizing the capacity to its fullest. We just wanted to acknowledge that. And this is also an existing condition slide on page 7. These are the current enrollments, maximum capacities based on the total classroom counts, the current enrollments, and the percent utilization, as well as the projections, 10-year projections. So you can see the imbalance there, and then just the general growth trend across really all of the schools. Not a surprise, significant area of growth in the Lemon Valley, Golden Valley area. Okay.
Adam, sorry, before we move off of slide 7,
Sure.
I think this would be a good time to bring up the feedback that we heard from the principal at Desert Heights, who shared an email with us a different number for capacity. He shared a count of students that put the capacity closer to 80 to 85%. So I'm curious if you can speak to that, of why there's sort of a difference of opinions, so that we can anchor on what is the actual capacity number of Desert Heights.
I did not have a chance to review that public comment. The Desert Heights School is one of the largest schools of its type, and the total number of classrooms is typically multiplied by an average classroom capacity, approximately 25 students per classroom on average, to arrive at that maximum capacity number. So that's a maximum. Really an optimum would be probably close to a 90% ratio for that total number, but that's really more of a mathematical calculation of if we had every classroom basically full at an average of 25 students per classroom times the total number of classrooms is how you arrive at that number. I'm not sure. Do you have that?
I'm looking at the email.
Yeah, so the email from the principal today said that he is currently has 470 students enrolled.
Okay.
Which our numbers here as of 10/1 are 448. And that looks like on count day he was at 441. So based on his email, they've had some enrollments since then. And then he also mentions that they have some early childhood. They have a strategies and integrated an early childhood development. They have a primary and intermediate CLS program, which is the comprehensive life skills to special education program, where students are primarily in one classroom, and then they also have primary and intermediate resource students, but those would be integrated into I think everything except for the early childhood should be integrated into IC numbers, right?
Yeah, those students are reflected as enrolled students in the total number.
Yeah, and we had the same report from the Lemon Valley principal, who said that they were, at the day that I went out there, which was last week, I think, they were at 757, which is higher than the IC enrollment. So it looks like maybe there's a bit of a trend in the North Valleys. They've gotten some enrollments since count day, which is, oh, I see Randy coming up. Randy with his amazing numbers.
Hi, for the record, Randy Baxter, school planner. In request earlier, I just ran an enrollment report from Infinite Campus on both of the schools in question. As of 5:16 this evening, Infinite Campus shows that Desert Heights has an enrollment of 457, and then Lemon Valley showed an enrollment of 726. They also have an additional 17 students in the early childhood program. So you put those two numbers together, it would come to 743 for Lemon Valley.
Which is about what the principal had mentioned. And that sounds like it'd be similar to what the Desert Heights.
727.
Desert Heights.
Oh, Desert Heights. It's showing 457.
And he's saying 470, so the 14 early childhood might not be included in that then?
Well,
I think they both have an early childhood program, and so are those not included?
okay, because let's see. Infinite Campus doesn't show an early childhood and ECE program at Desert Heights. They do have the pre-K students, which are on the basically special ed early childhood,
Right.
and those do show up in the regular enrollment counts.
Okay. He has it broken down. Okay. All right. Well,
So there's different ways to calculate capacity. Again, that 816 number is assuming that, there are not special programs in a school, that every classroom is utilized to its fullest extent, not somewhat metered by a special program that has a lower student-teacher ratio. So I think, that's sort of just a different calculus. Special programs come and go. This is a base capacity that perhaps wants to be, have like a coefficient associated with it based on the program. So that's why we put this in there, that there are a handful of special programs at this school. Whether or not that should be reflected in the downgraded capacity, we choose to illustrate the schools based on kind of the brick and mortar, number of classrooms, maximum capacity, noting that we want some flexibility. Closer to a 90-95% would be more optimal in an elementary school where kids are more static. They're not, passing classes throughout the day. And then perhaps downgrading that even a little further for special program considerations. But that varies from year to year. So to avoid more confusion than there already sometimes is on this, these are the static numbers for the schools that we just sort of work down from a maximum. So, thank you for that discussion. It's sometimes an inexact science. But we've got some areas that we talked about last month that we want to try and walk through again. We broke this down, this slide the same as last month, A, B, C, and D. You can see this number of students that are currently enrolled in our schools in each area on slide 8. And then we'll walk through a couple options that look at rezoning those areas. Also a repeat from last month, some of this primary guidance from our administrative regulation 7107 that governs the committee, oftentimes a helpful anchor for decision making when it's not crystal clear which option might be best. Helps the committee center itself from time to time. Diving into some of the same options that we saw last month, now hopefully some pros and cons to each might be a little more clear. This is option A, or rather option B, option 1, involving area B moving from Lemon Valley to Desert Heights. This area B currently has 49 elementary students, so this is and just to reiterate everyone's bearings, this is Military Road, right? This is Stead Boulevard over here. Lear Boulevard, I think, is right here. So this would involve Area B, currently all zoned to Lemon Valley, being rezoned to Desert Heights. And that's it. That's the only change, so no impact to Alice Smith or Stead in the before or current on the top of slide 11, and the after, the impacts of implementing this. This again is a repeat slide from last month, so we didn't modify the effective date. This red line, this vertical line, typically represents when the change would go into effect. So you could see the impact of 50 or so students moving from Lemon Valley to Desert Heights. You'd see a similar impact just 1 year sooner, potentially. Still leaving a bit high enrollment at Lemon Valley, but definitely making an improvement. Okay, so that's option 1. Option 2 takes option 1 and adds to it the movement of Area D, which is also a part of Lemon Valley Elementary School, and moving them over to Alice Smith. Area D has 35 students in it currently. And so slide 13 shows you what the enrollment impacts would look like. So same impact to Desert Heights as option 1, just moving B over to Desert Heights. A little impact to Alice Smith, moving all of Area D over to Alice Smith, and a little bit greater enrollment relief to Lemon Valley. Okay. Saw these same options last month. Option 3, another kind of variation, building further on the movement of both B and D out of Lemon Valley. But in this variation, creating sort of east and west portions of D. So you've got Area D West, which is much closer to Stead Elementary School. There's only 10 students currently living in that, half of Area D. Moving them to Stead, they're much closer. And because Stead is a bit full today, we took the opportunity to take a look at Area A, moving A into Desert Heights as well. So in this scenario, more students are moving into Desert Heights, both A and B moving into Desert Heights, slightly fewer students moving into Alice Smith because 10 of them are going into Stead, if you can follow all those arrows. It's really helpful for me to do air push-ups. I don't know if it's helpful to you. I cannot control it. These maps sometimes are helpful to get a sense of where the students live. These are geolocated students through Infinite Campus. Just to get a sense of the density, like I mentioned, Area D, there's only 10 students currently zoned for Lemon Valley who in this option 3 are proposed to be rezoned to Stead, and a little more density over here. D East would go to Alice Smith. An aerial, if you're not familiar with this area, a lot more warehouse on the North Virginia corridor way up here. You got Stead Boulevard with an underpass at the freeway, and then the new and improved Lemon Drive access. Further down Virginia Street, you get into Golden Valley and Alice Smith. All right, so this is slide 17, the impact data associated with option 3. The largest, or largest so far number of students going into Desert Heights, so you can see those numbers creeping up a little bit more, but the same relief to Lemon Valley as in option 2, and then just a little bit different distribution on Stead and Alice Smith. We've got an option 4, which we also saw last month, so no change to this one. But this is the first time that we are looking at Area C, and this is simple in that this is all of Area C moving from Lemon Valley to Desert Heights, and that's the only movement associated with this option 4. You'll recall Area C currently has 110 students that are going to Lemon Valley in it. So it impacts the projected enrollments as follows. Again, this one looks like it's providing the largest amount of relief, enrollment relief to Lemon Valley, filling up Desert Heights a good bit more, and again, not the numbers are not subdued factoring in those special programs. These are really just raw enrollment versus maximum capacity percentages. All right, so this is really one of the only pieces of new material this month, trying to maximize that relief to Lemon Valley, noting that there is, really only just a few students in Area D West, but also that there's maybe a little bit of capacity available in Alice Smith, and we don't want to leave that on the table if we can help it. So you see Area C moving from Lemon Valley to Desert Heights, just like in our base 4 option, but adding that split Area D between Alice Smith and Stead. That's what the numbers look like here. Alice Smith numbers the same as option 3. Stead numbers, there's no relief to Stead in that scenario, so Stead goes up and only up in this option 4B. So these last 2 slides are our attempt to summarize the pros and cons as we understand them. In the past, when we've developed an array of options and talked through them in detail, it's hard kind of to tease out which ones are better than the others. So we try to put it into a single table. You can see the numbers, the enrollment numbers. Some provide more relief than others. I think it's important to note I double checked and got confirmation that I guess there was only one option 3 that involves Area A. Which one was that? Yeah, option 3 that impacts Area A. Area A is currently within the walk zone for Stead Elementary, and it would be, if it was rezoned into Desert Heights, that neighborhood would be outside the walk zone to Desert Heights, and so would be afforded general ed transportation services, which would likely trigger an additional allocation, bus driver allocation. So that's kind of a con to consider relative to moving Area A to Desert Heights. That was in option 3. But otherwise, I'll let you guys read through that. Ultimately, there's not a lot of new content here. There's 2 things I wanted to leave you with. Number 1, you do have some latitude, I think, to modify the recommended motion, both in terms of the effective school year. It's agendized for 23-24. You could choose to recommend it go into effect 24-25. We've discussed that previously, but also a modified motion relative to these options. Just because an option, now that you have a good handle on the different areas and how they might be subdivided or recombined, I think you've all done this enough to be able to kind of make hybrid options in your mind, and we could talk through that and potentially articulate a motion. I just don't want you to feel entirely constrained to the options that are presented here. We do have that flexibility, although at the end of the day, I also don't want you tilting at windmills, because we've stared at this a lot, and while we think there is an opportunity to provide a little bit of overcrowding relief where a little bit of overcrowding exists, there's perhaps not a perfect option before us this evening. So with that, I'll stop talking and let you guys maybe try and work this through. Thank you so much.
I think it'd be good for Tyler and I to give the reports on our visits to the schools before we start discussion so that we can share what we heard from parents and teachers as well as the principals. We both had a tour of each school and kind of got, to see the school in action. So do you want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
So yeah, building off of that, I think because we are not meeting in the community, I think it was important. We felt that we actually go and meet with the schools in person and provide an opportunity for the parents and the staff to engage with us. And so I did that with Desert Heights a few weeks ago. It was sort of a morning get coffee with donuts with the principal, and a number of parents showed up as well as the principal. And then after that, I also got to walk around the school. So what I learned is the parent community and the school community take great pride in the special programs that are there. A lot of them are on variances. The principal has been there for a few years and was not sure why so many special programs showed up, but so there's a legacy of sort of having a number of special programs there that is important to Desert Heights. We walked to the school. The parents didn't have too strong of a preference that they vocalized other that they didn't want it to impact their ability to get variances into the special programs. It was like the primary thing raised. So they were curious if a number of new students are coming in, would that limit their impacts, their ability to continue on variances. We walked the school. There are basically 4 or 5 open classrooms that are currently not being utilized. We were sort of in the morning at 9:30, and so I saw like what was being used, which is really helpful to me to like visualize and put like to reality the utilization numbers that Adam and the district share. So I think that the main thing that I heard from them was a concern of special programs may need more space than is traditionally utilized or in sort of these calculations, and a concern from the principal of sort of option 4 with 100 students coming would sort of overwhelm them in his perspective.
Okay. And I attended the Lemon Valley PTO meeting, which was a hybrid meeting. We had several parents Zoom in, and then I was able to be there in person and see the library, which is also being used as a classroom currently. The back half of the library is kind of half walled off to be a space for students. It's a really interesting campus. More than half of the students are in temporary buildings in some way, shape, or form. They seem permanent because they've been there for so long. The original building is pretty tiny. It's the 3, it's the same as the school I went to. I went to Lincoln Park, and it's the 3 built wings, but one of the wings goes perpendicular rather than all parallel. And they are using every space available. They, in fact, have resource classes in what they would typically consider storage areas. So their preference is doing nothing is not feasible for them. They cannot continue with their current spaces. They don't feel that they are serving their students. And some examples of that, in order to go to their specials, which are like music and computers, they're doubling up. So you have 1.5 groups of kids going to, so one teacher has to split their students up and goes to music, and the other half goes to library. And then, but they're paired with other teachers. So say there's 3 classrooms, 1.5 goes to music, 1.5 goes to library. And then if one of those teachers is absent that day, half of the class doesn't go to the special because there isn't anywhere to go. So they're definitely overcrowded. They mentioned a couple things about some other common spaces that are impacted by the overcrowding. The cafeteria is too overcrowded during the day, so they're serving multiple lunches. Their pre-K students have lunch delivered to the classroom because just physically the building, it's easier for them to take it to them, but also because they just don't have more times in the cafeteria. So, and these are not decisions for us. They're more just for us to kind of visualize how crowded it is. So, and that was really, they wanted us to know that the do nothing option is not preferable to them. They really do want something. And also also take great pride in their school. It was amazing to see how they had just done a Yogurt Beach fundraiser, and literally the Yogurt Beach gift cards were piled. I mean, it was incredible the pride that they take. And they were sad to know that they were going to lose some of their families, but they also feel like what's best for their kids is to have a learning environment where they're not overcrowded. So one of the things which is really this is going to be a struggle for us as a committee, because when we talked about option 4, they excitedly said this could solve some traffic issues in the North Valleys, because I'm gonna point to it. So the people in Area C have to turn left onto Military, and then left again onto Lemon, which are 2 streets that are very backed up in the morning, because there's a lot of commuters going to warehouses and office buildings and things. And so they have said that there were a few parents who were actually from that area and said that they sit through 2 to 3 lights to turn, and it's not the safest. So they actually had said they were shocked that they weren't zoned for Desert Heights, because it's actually would be so much simpler to get there. So I do want to note that in option 4, it's not mentioned, but I think it would reduce some transportation time for those students, simply because they are going a pretty long way to go down Military and then up Lemon, rather than just straight up to Military to Desert Heights. So I don't know the mileage on that, but I would imagine it would actually be some reduced transportation. I don't know if it would reduce a bus, though. I think they're still out of the walk zone for sure. Let's see. I think that was it. They're very much looking forward to potential capital improvements at that school too, but that's not for our decision. But anyway, it was a really insightful visit, and I'm glad that we've made that choice to do that. So we hope to continue to do that work. All right, so discussions, thoughts.
Kristen DeHaan for the record. With the special programs, my understanding, at least for the CLS, and I assume it would be the same for developmental pre-K and integrated pre-K, and I think there was an EC Strat also. Yes. So my understanding is that those students go to their closest, to the school that is closest to sort of where they live. So it's not going to be their zoned school necessarily. If their zoned school doesn't have CLS or the other things, that's not where they go. I teach social resource, and so there are 3 elementary schools of social resource. So it depends on where they're living, if they're going to go to Moss or to Double Diamond or to Silver Lake, I think it is. Silver Lake, Silver Springs, whichever one that is. So I don't know that they would necessarily be impacted, that they aren't on variances, is my understanding, and anybody can correct me that knows differently. But I don't know that they would move. It might impact variances for other students, for general education students, more than special education students.
Adam, do we know, or maybe they might have mentioned it to you, Tyler. So the parents that mentioned that they were on variance, are they there because there's a sibling in one of those special programs? Is that why? Because based on this list, the special programs are all related to special education. The resource, CLS, and strategies and early ECE, those are all special education programs. So that wouldn't be like choosing to go to a STEM program. It's very different.
I think those count as variances, though, because those students aren't zoned for the school.
Any? Tammy, do you happen to know? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot here. I would imagine that it would still be considered a variance. I mean, because like I I have a child in a signature high school program, and we still have to sign a variance for it.
But I think signature high schools are different. My
Right.
kids both did that as well. I'm just thinking of the students that I have, and I haven't ever thought of it as considered to be a variance. It's just this is the closest school that has the program that is best for the student.
Right, but I'm just wondering if that is impacting the non-zoned students in that school, that percentage, because it's pretty high for that. It's above the district average for Desert Heights, right? Well, I think that might be some information that we need to find out. And we can't control what programs are at a school, but I think we need to go back to the regulations that are given to us by the Board of Trustees and look at these options and make some, and decide if we're going to make a recommendation for, based on those regulations. So, assigning students to their closest school, no islands. This isn't impacting feeder patterns, so we're okay with that. We definitely don't want to add a burden on transportation if we can help it. And then I think all of the options are keeping subdivisions and neighborhood units together. So I think we're okay on that. So does anybody have any thoughts on any other? I think we have some public comment. Should we take that? Oh, go ahead.
Hi, Lauren Rushing for the record. Tyler, you said you went to Desert Heights? Thank you. Sorry about that. It's right here in front of my face. And you were there at 9:30 in the morning. You saw 4 or 5 unused classrooms. Was that because they had teachers out or any sort of special event, assembly, or they just were unused classrooms?
The majority of them were unused. There was, he showed me 6 classrooms. One of them, which I'm not including in my count, was sort of used to pull students out to do like language training or other special programs. And so those were sort of like, I saw them empty, but there was a teacher in there. So like, I didn't count that in my count of 4 to 5.
Okay, and so
But the other ones were like, there was furniture stored in, but so like there is space. They fully acknowledge that.
Okay, so 25 students a room is preferable? That's optimal?
That's basically the average across K-5 school, not counting a special program that we use to calculate the max capacity.
So just with 4 of those classrooms, they could potentially house 100 students?
That math
assuming?
checks out, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Again, 100% max capacity is not optimal. We'd like to stay a little under that. To give them some breathing room and some flexibility, because not every, there might be 22, they don't come in perfect packages. So sure enough, we're going to end up with an odd number and it won't fit as nicely as we project. But that's how we do the math. That's how we generate the spreadsheet.
Holly Boardman. So in the classroom count and then what we heard from the principal, 110 might be too much to go to Desert Heights. But we kind of need to alleviate Lemon Valley more. And then secondly, I mean, that's not me commenting on anything, just math-wise.
Yeah.
So then the next size down for looking at in Area B is like half the size. And it also had struck me weird as if we moved Area C that appears closer to Lemon and then didn't move the B that's further away. But your comment about the traffic makes more sense because basically Area B turns right on Military, right? And then
Right.
left.
So there's no way for to go around
Yeah. So your comment about the driving actually helped me realize that B isn't like further because they would go right and they wouldn't have to deal with two lefts onto Military and Lemon.
They're still dealing with the one left. But it's a half. But it's half of the amount of people. So I think 4 to 5 classrooms or potentially 6 is more than enough truly for 110 students. But again, I'm not the principal making those decisions of how to use each of those rooms. And we all know that, a resource pullout for any sort of language instruction or resource is very important and is needed. We as a group cannot make decisions on special education. We can't make decisions on socioeconomic status. That's not in our purview. So we have to look at specifically just those administrative regulations and not say, oh, well, this is going to change the demographics of that school, or they have, this percentage of special ed students. Yes, they do, but that's not where we don't have any way to manage that. That's not our decision. That's something the district has to look at. Okay. I think we'll take our public comment, and then we can have a little more discussion and see if we're ready to make a motion.
Pablo Nava Duran.
Hello, sorry I'm not able to be here last meeting, so I want to give a mind about the Lemon Valley. So my cousin lived there in the Valley area. He used to attend Lemon Valley last season. Now he attend O'Brien. So I want to give a note that Lemon Valley is overcrowded. It definitely needs some relief. And then for Area B did not like relief for overcrowded Lemon Valley. You can reduce number of women, and then option 2, Lemon Valley did not reduce overcrowded Lemon Valley, but create overcrowded for Alex Smith. That's a very no-win situation for both. So option 3. Reads for some from a desert heights, so area B, and then let me see, area A and A and B go to desert side, and then area D go to Stead. Feel like this is area D did not make sense for walking to Stead for this State Street, and area A did not make sense to go to desert high because they're already in walk zone, so it did not make sense to me. And then option 4 is the best solution. I think this one area C have a lot of people. There are a lot of development that people could move to, and then if you imagine that the Lebanon Valley, no valley is a wall with the city mean limit. They had to drive to Lebanon Valley. Had to try to military road and turn left on Lebanon Valley. That create a traffic, and I think this one we zone to Desert Heights is a lot closer to Lebanon Valley. If you see the area C, it's a lot closer to Lebanon Valley than Desert Heights on the graphics. But on the road, if you look at the road, it did not connect it. It did not go so well. So I think Desert Heights is the best solution for them. And then for area. And then for option 4, I think that I recommend option 4, so that we zone to Desert Heights. And area A remain instead. And this pocket area, it does seem like that doesn't have a lot of students. And just remain Lemon Valley. I know No Valley is a very tough geographic area to rezone.
Thank you, Pablo. We appreciate you being here, and we did miss you last month. All right, do we have any other public comment?
No.
Okay. All right. Tyler?
So I think there's three things on my mind to act on. One, Lemon Valley is clearly overcrowded. Desert Heights is concerned about staff recommendation, and the area south of 395 needs action because it's just so far away from Lemon Valley. Those are the three things resounding in my mind, and option 2 is the one that actually jumps out to me more. I think the difference between option 2 and option 4 is 110 students going into Desert Heights are pulled out of Lemon Valley versus 85, and so I feel like option 2 actually gives Lemon Valley a fair amount of relief. From the projections in the years out, it is pretty balanced, and the fact that there is a new elementary school planned for this area in the 5 to 10 year horizon where there start to be some concerns on option 2, we're going to have to revisit this all when that school opens. So option 2 to me is more exciting, more desirable at this point, to balance out and thread the needle of what we're hearing from the community.
Would you think that a hybrid of 4B and 2 with the area here, splitting that up? I don't know what the numbers would look like, but if we did area B and then split up area D, like in 4B, just because that side of area D is in fact much closer to Stead. What would you think about that? Just throwing it out there.
So you're basically what's
Making a
shown on
hybrid
this
option. So instead of this one going to Desert Heights, but then still doing this split.
Okay.
Just throwing it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's. I was anchoring on option 2 just to keep it a bit more simple, but I think
Sure.
the fact of splitting up area, the south. What is south of 395? It's area
D.
D.
Yeah, area D, we have with 35 total kids, but only 10 of whom would be in that
section that could
section.
I think that makes sense. I had heard at some point that there was still concern about Stead not having capacity, but that's a small amount.
Yeah, it's 10 students. Yeah.
I think that makes
Shannon?
sense.
Yeah, I thought we wanted to keep, Shannon Coley for the record, I thought we wanted to keep A because it was walking to Stead. Yeah. Okay, then that's 2, right? 2. Am I on 3? I'm on 3. Never mind.
Kristen DeHaan for the record. The potential school, I think you said you're looking out past 10 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think most likely, given these projections, you can see even 10 years into the future, while there's mild overcrowding beginning to creep into the numbers, really wouldn't justify an entire additional school. But, a lot can change, and as we're going to hear in the next item, we have major capital investments into these schools coming as well. This certainly buys us considerable relief in the near term.
Thank you, Christine and Tyler, for going out to the schools to get information. I think it's super valuable, and basically tells us that the numbers on slide 4 don't fully reflect the student experience, right? Desert Heights is maybe utilizing more of the building than we thought they were. Lemon Valley, even though it doesn't look super overcrowded, is really impacted by the footprint and how many people are in the building. I'm curious to hear if anybody has heard from Alice Smith or Stead on whether the numbers that we have reflect the student experience there and how any recommendations we might make could impact them.
They were on the outreach, similar to sort of we said we want to go meet with the community. Adam connected us with the principals, and
Good thing Jen Van Trust just walked in the room.
I would like to hear from our area superintendent for this area, Jen Van Trest. I'd also like to, I think the date, the born on date came off of this slide, but remember at one point we noted that Stead and Lemon Valley, or rather specifically Alice Smith and Stead, are of a very different design type. And I think that reflects how they are able to operate with those kind of capacities. So.
Good evening, Jennifer Van Tress, Area Superintendent for the North Valley School. Thanks for being here tonight. So as far as capacities for Alice Smith, let me start with that one. Alice Smith came off of a multi-track system in 2019. They were very high in numbers, probably close to 900, and then were rezoned 2 years ago. At that point, no, actually it was for this school year.
We brought the 6th graders up to the new
Thank
O'Brien,
you.
and we rezoned a portion of Panther Valley into Esther Bennett.
Yes.
So they've come down 150 students, 200 students.
While it's exciting for them to have a lower student population, they are definitely in a position to bring more kids back. They're hoping they get more kids back. Why, you know, it's they're sitting at 400 and 500, right around there. Their staff love having kids in their building, and they it seems they feel very discombobulated by so many students not being there now, which sounds weird, right? Like, I know, I'm like, really? And they said, no, we liked the busyness, we liked how things good. They had systems in place, everything went really well. So if there is a consideration to have students go to Alice Smith, I know that they would welcome them back with open arms, or welcome them to their school. Stead, again, because the footprint is different, this is what we would call the she shed building. Sheep shed, she shed, she shed, sheep shed. It's been a long day. Y'all know what I'm talking about, so. Sheep shed schools. The 90% capacity actually does have a huge impact on their footprint. The building itself feels more impacted. When you think about lunches and the number of students that are coming through at lunchtime, the lunchroom is very full. There's a lot of kids that are going through. Their library is smaller. They have a great playground. But the makeup of the building itself is really hard when you start getting at those higher capacity numbers. So as far as the building designs of Stead versus Alice Smith is definitely designed to have more students in the building with less impact overall in the day-to-day running of a building. The library is bigger at Alice Smith, the lunchroom's bigger at Alice Smith, and so you don't have those that feeling in a building when you're really have a lot of students on site. So, is there any questions I can answer for you other than my sheep shed, she shed comments?
No, that was really helpful. Thank you very much for jumping in, even though you weren't expecting to speak tonight. So thank you for that. So I know we said that's only 10 students, but I think that's something to really consider if that's going to impact them even more. I mean, they are much closer. I agree with you though. Area D is abnormally zoned, and it's something that we should address.
And when you look at our guidance, as we've alluded to, like, it's there.
Yeah.
Closer to the school. Yeah, it seems
absolutely
slam dunk.
So I think at this point we can do a couple of things. We can make some recommendations based on the areas and make some choices, and we don't have to pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 4B. We could just go by each of the areas that's recommended, or we can make a option 5, or we can I don't know.
Can I make a motion?
I was just going to say, is anyone feeling ready to make a motion? Yes.
Can we go to slide 20, please? The emotion's coming.
I have no doubts.
All right, so what I'm hearing from our discussion is a version of what's on the screen, moving the yellow area, though, from area A to area B. So that's what's in my head, moving this yellow area from here to here.
C to B.
That's C? Okay, C to B. So I would like to make a motion to adopt, I don't know, this is, I'm going to maybe butcher this, to recommend a zoning change which reflects moving Area B to Desert Heights and moving these, I don't know how to describe the D East to Alice Smith and D West to Stead by in the school year 2023-24.
Okay. All right. So everybody clear on what those, okay. Do we have a second?
Kristen Dahan, for the record, I second.
Do we have any further discussion?
Polly Boardman. So what we were just hearing is if Stead is more crowded, even though that area is closer to Stead, we're still not concerned with giving them more students when it sounds like Alice Smith could take more students. I guess, you know, in option 2, all of those going over, are we more thinking like long term that we want that sliver of D West to end up at Stead? Because I mean, if the other school is another 10 years out and they start to get more crowded at Stead, I guess my concern would be, I mean, why wouldn't we go with option 2 when we just heard what we did about the building architecture?
Adam, can you, so a quick question about transportation. All of Area D, are they all on one bus currently? Since there's only 35 of them, do you happen to know?
Yeah, they're all provided transportation. They're all on one bus because they all go to the same school. If Area D was to be split, they would all still receive transportation, whether they are all rezoned to Alice Smith or if some are rezoned to Stead and some are rezoned to Alice Smith. However, I was able to confirm that that could be incorporated into existing routes. So it wouldn't add a bus burden, it would just modify the routes. And the students themselves would receive transportation in any scenario.
Okay.
It's just where they're zoned.
In my mind, it was 10 students, so it wasn't going to dramatically, but that's my logic.
Yeah.
And the walk, and like it's so much, it's closer. The proximity was in my mind.
Polly Boardman, I mean, there is a freeway in the way, so proximity to me doesn't seem like it's as clear. I totally get what you're saying. Like,
right.
I could potentially go over the way, but I'm devil's advocate. So I guess the only thing is it might be 10 students now, but in the next 10 years, are there going to be more students? I don't know, you know, the housing there, it grows, you know, so I guess that would be my concern if that school is already nearing overcrowding, if we would really want to split it like that.
That area is pretty built out with warehouses and the
yeah, not necessarily growth of like where the parks are there, but
yeah, but
students are moving in.
Right. I mean, if there's 30 homes in the park and all of a sudden they're all have kids, I understand what you're saying. Okay, so we have to take a vote because we have a motion and a second, so we need to take a vote, but it's okay if we don't like this decision or this motion. We can continue to, do we have any other discussion on it? Otherwise, we're going to take a vote. Okay, so all those in favor of our option 5, which would be splitting up Area D in an east and west, so one part of it going to Stead, one part going to Alice Smith, and then Area B going to Desert Heights. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Carries 3 to 4.
That was, yeah, it was 4. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Thank you, everybody. Motion passes. Okay. Next on our agenda is for presentation and discussion on our district-wide school facility modernization plan. And there was a, thank you, Neil.
Happy holidays.
Thank you, Jen. There was a presentation made to the board on Tuesday, and so we are getting a recap of the most recent recommendations. Adam.
Hey, so before I begin this one, just to close the book, nice work on that, you guys. That's how it's supposed to work. You know, it doesn't need to be unanimous. Because of the motion to enact this for next school year, we'll strive to bring this recommendation to the Board of Trustees as soon as possible, potentially as soon as January 10th, I think, is their next available board meeting. So we'll make you aware of that as well. Whether some or any of you are able to come and attest to this deliberation, I think is helpful and healthy. They really appreciate the work you do and like to hear about the sausage making sometime. But it's more about getting whatever action they approve, if they affirm this one, and getting that notice to families as soon as possible. All right, so this is a lengthy slide deck that I'm going to go through really fast. It's pretty dense with data, and I apologize in advance. I'm not going to, really explain it as thoroughly as I might otherwise, and I'll kind of close it with a little bit more of the why on the pace. But as we discussed at our last meeting, we are engaged with Canon Design, a large architecture consulting firm, for a district-wide facility modernization study. This is really the next chapter in our capital improvements program, where we've addressed the majority of the pent-up overcrowding and see a future where continued capital resources in the form of WC1 revenues are likely to persist, but new school construction will diminish. We can reserve financial resources to build new schools if and when are needed, but in the meantime, redirect those capital resources into our existing schools, not dissimilar from what we did at Swope Middle School recently and O'Brien Middle School, smaller type of projects and even larger type of projects all across the district. But before we embark on that, we really needed to have a thorough and impartial study conducted so that we can make more well-informed decisions. They're probably 30% of the way through their effort, but over the next 3 months or so is really going to pick up the pace in terms of intensity. A lot of work has been spent establishing expectations and advisory committees and things like that. They've done a ton of data gathering and conducted surveys and really set the foundation and framework up for some very specific scenario discussion and ultimately recommendations to the board and our capital projects team. So again, this presentation was presented to the Capital Funding Protection Committee on December 1st, and on December 13th was presented to the Board of Trustees. This is a recap to those committees that was presented of the work that they have done to date. As I mentioned, field assessments, surveys, various planning and meetings scheduled for January. A little bit more orientation type of information. This is basically a breakdown of every single one of our existing schools. These are aerial images, but so you can kind of see them by type. I don't know where I see the she sheds. I think we call them baby boomer era elementary schools. These are built in predominantly the 1960s, but we've got a lot of them. So this was just some.
Okay, so the style is the 3 paralleled buildings. That's what the sheep shed is, right?
Yep.
Tammy? Okay, so it's when the office is in the middle, When you come up, a lot of them have like crayons
Yep.
and like pencils. Their columns are painted into either Crayolas or pencils. And then they have 3 parallel buildings. Yeah, that's the sheep shed style. Yes. Thank you.
But as the slide suggests, how do we compare schools of a certain era and certain type to our newest schools sort of as the benchmark to begin to aspire and develop a plan to improve all schools to a level of parity or equity from a facility standpoint. So that's the work that's been done. And in support of that, they've developed 6 categories with 30 specific key performance indicators total relative to each category and specific sub-measures within each one. There is a gigantic spreadsheet that they have used to assess every school based on these metrics. These metrics were developed through input of our various stakeholder groups as well as public surveys. So, it's a very objective process, but it's also very comprehensive, not just taking into account the age of the school or the specific facility condition, but other less tangible variables that are nevertheless very important and impactful to the overall environment and efficacy of the school. So it's a pretty intense rubric, but it's intentionally designed to capture kind of a more comprehensive assessment of our schools, not just, which one's the oldest. Just one of these metrics is this energy use intensity. It's one way of sort of normalizing the energy use consumption across buildings per square foot, whether you're on gas or electric, kind of normalizes that. And as you would expect, some of the older schools are the most inefficient. Not only does it cost the district money, this is the same pot of money that pays teachers' salaries, pays utility bills. And when we're talking about the entire district, we're talking about an annual utility bill with 8 figures on it. So saving a little bit of energy here and there can add up really quickly. This is just an example of many, many dozens of data points that are informing these next slides. So again, with the aerial silhouettes representing sort of the groups of school types and really still scrubbing the data, so not prepared to provide specific scores, but trying to range them in, good, fair, poor type of red, yellow, green levels across all of the different categories. And again, bear with us on any anomalies. I know there's still a couple that kind of are head scratchers, but the trends that you would expect, more reds in the older schools, frankly, and you can see our newer schools with greens across the boards corresponding with, hey, this is our benchmark, these are our best schools, and some of the older schools are lacking or are more deficient relative to the others. Okay, so the next 3 slides break it down: high school, middle school, and elementary school. Slide 36 here on the overall PDF. I guess we've got just the high schools. And you can see, again, as you might expect, one of our older schools, Worcester, rated at the top. It's not entirely chronological, and there's different probable reasons for that. We did talk a little bit about some of the better or brighter colors, more greens and yellows on safety and security. There's a lot of variables to safety and security, not just one, just like all the categories, but I think that represents a little bit more of the continuous or diligent efforts of the school district to invest in those categories than in some of the other categories. But nevertheless, you can see those older schools with greater degrees of deficiencies. So just continuing on, we've got middles and elementaries. You can see we've built a number of new middle schools. There's more newer middle schools across our district than high schools, but nevertheless still a handful there that are 50 plus years old, all kind of in the red at the top. That's right. We talked about this at the board meeting. That red in the lower right-hand corner is a bust in the data. O'Brien Middle School obviously rebuilt, brand new, screen across the board. But on the far right, that red dot is clearly an error. Apologies for that. Elementary school, this doesn't include every single one. We have so many, but you get the idea. The brand newest schools at the bottom are all glowing green, as they should be. And up at the top, you can see them all labeled as baby boomers and one-of-a-kinds. Is kind of how we term, custom schools. Mount Rose, Anderson, veterans, all very old, very unique, and deficient relative to our most modern standards. So these next slides are sort of different ways of illustrating similar data. A lot to take in on these slides. Every single school is represented across 3 separate graphs: elementary, middle, and high. The dots themselves are sized relative to their enrollments. So you can see some much larger than others. Each dot, or many of the dots, are sort of haloed in a blue color to try to take into consideration the student population eligible for free and reduced lunch as sort of a proxy for community poverty, and to take that into consideration as well. You can also then color code them based on the good, fair, poor adequacy ratings that we just went through. The next couple of slides try to draw some conclusions about this data, so you can see this correlation, the slope of the line correlating with age. I mean, if you can see the names of those labels, zero in on a few schools and try and make sense of it all, but really just looking at the data from a variety of different angles to try to help inform and draw some conclusions. This label talks about inequitable access to programs. Oftentimes, some of the spaces in our newer schools afford the staff and the students more opportunity for special programs or different types of engagement, whereas some of those older schools with the more inadequate or deficient facilities, often in areas of higher poverty, do not provide that same level of access to programs. This slide was attempting to draw to our attention sort of the gulf between our newer or newest middle schools up here in the green, and really the larger perceived delta between the older schools kind of at the bottom. Whereas, the elementary schools, of course, there's newer and older as well, but maybe a little bit more evenly distributed across these graphs. So really trying to draw our attention to these middle schools on this graph. And then, as I mentioned, older schools, higher degrees of poverty. Those older schools are often located in older communities or older areas of our community that are perhaps in even greater need for these types of services and special programs. All right, again, a different style graph. This one intended to maybe draw a little bit more attention to the enrollment or the student body population. Really what this consultant was explaining is that, the primary tenets of this study were to improve the equity and efficiency of our facility portfolio across the district. So beginning to draw our attention to some very small student bodies relative to the traditional elementary, middle school, and high school sizes. So you can see those light blue and navy blue dots all across the district, really at all levels, but particularly elementary and middle, where maybe we have less than 300 students in a K-5 elementary school, less than 700 or 750 students at a 6-8 middle school, perhaps opportunities for improved efficiency. These are preliminary conclusions or preliminary trends they're seeing in the data. Oh, wrong way. So, a good deal of time was spent talking about these next several slides and really recognizing that this is a very in-depth and thorough process and a district-wide endeavor that deserves to be conducted with fidelity. That also must be considered within the context of the need, which is widespread and exists today, and the resource availability, which is significant and also exists today. This exercise is not being conducted in support of a future bond measure. If we have preliminary conclusions or early action items that we feel are, if there are opportunities available, we might do well to consider them. So this was just a hypothetical schedule that they went through that basically illustrated a scenario where beginning an early action item might allow us to bring the benefits to the students a school year earlier than waiting. Sometimes, a delay of even a couple of months at this point, we don't open schools in October. And certainly opening at semester would be extremely disruptive. It's very not ideal. So that was part of the context that we entered into the next several slides. And when I say we, I really do mean the consultant. We've been pretty intentional to direct them to conduct this independently. These are their recommendations, and I'm taking advantage of this audience to communicate the progress publicly and also to engaged group like yourselves.
Follow up on that, Adam, if I may.
You bet.
I guess I have not been watching the school district for a particularly long time other than being a student, but then there was a break and came back, and now I'm going to be a parent in this district. My observation is that this is one of the largest efforts the district has done recently to engage the community to get feedback in these decisions. And I guess I'm curious from your perspective if that is indeed true, and why the district decided this sort of thing warranted this level of investment for community engagement to get the feedback.
Well, we engage with the public on a variety of topics, whether it's should we or should we not adjust the bell schedules. You got a few people's attention recently. This is a $100 to $150 million per year annual investment for the foreseeable future that is a district-wide endeavor that will result in transformational impacts on school campuses. It's also going to have difficult decisions in front of it. Not everybody gets to go first, and not everybody's going to get a brand new school. So it's important that, while this is exciting and positive, that we have a foundation of engagement and impartiality and professionalism to stand on when someone ultimately disagrees with the recommendation. I mean, maybe to put it more simply, decisions are often better when more voices are included in the conversation.
I would just like to add to that, Christine Hull, for the record, that I think this district, having grown up here, has always done a good job of engaging the community. I can think of a really specific time when Mendive Middle School was opening, and we as students who were impacted by that opening got to have say in the name, in the mascot, in the colors, and maybe as a seventh grader, that was so exciting to get to submit a vote for that. But they also engaged our parents and asked our parents their thoughts on it because that was going to impact our everyday lives. So I think this district has a history of engaging, and that's what this committee is about. I wouldn't necessarily say it's more or less, but it's impacting the entire district. So maybe that's why it feels like more, because I think communication has been very localized when it comes to zoning or a school naming. That becomes more localized because it's people who are in that community that are concerned. But the bell schedule thing brought a lot of people out too. So that might.
I feel like my question was interpreted negatively. And I
No,
apologize.
I don't think it was interpreted negative. I was just going to say, I think you're right. This district does a great job of engaging the community, and I've worked in other districts across the nation, and I will tell you that I think the district does a great job, and I'm glad you recognized that.
I'm observing that as well, and I
Yes.
think this is it's an interesting model to replicate for other issues because the district is better when there are all the voices heard, and so I
Yes.
think I'm observing that this is bringing people to the table in a thoughtful way and allowing engagement for big decisions that are going to impact all of us that live here. So kudos. I'm just sort of curious the thought process of when it is to take it to this level.
It's such a significant endeavor. It really needs to be done this way.
Kristen Tahn, for the record, I just don't know what CFPC stands for, and maybe you've told us that before, but I looked through here and I didn't see what it is.
Sorry about that. Good question. That is your cousins on the advisory committee circuit, the Capital Funding Protection Committee. So I'm going to burn through these slides with some important points. These are, so again, zeroing in on our middle schools and our oldest middle schools here, running through a few different categories, which projects or which schools might benefit the students with the highest needs. This is across the top. The schools with the poorest conditions, projects which might improve the most inadequate facilities, improve utilization and operational efficiency, doesn't limit other options. I'll explain what that kind of implies in a couple slides, and then opportunities which might be most shovel ready. So you can see some gray dots. And
I'm sorry, I'm not following why we zeroed in just on middle schools.
It had partially to do with some of these categories and partially to do with the divide that they illustrated on this slide, that there's really a more extreme illustration of haves and have-nots across our middle schools. And this is now trending towards the early action recommendation. It's not to dismiss the needs or opportunities at any other levels. It was more to try to tease out early action opportunities, if any. And they started gravitating towards the middle schools as best as I can relay it.
I was just surprised because on that divide chart, it felt like the elementary schools had more of the need. So if there's any more you could share on why we zeroed in on middle schools, it sounds like action, like they're shovel ready, or.
Yep. I'll get to that in just a moment. So next couple of slides highlight, describe a little bit why the green check marks and the gray boxes. So Vaughan, our student community among the most at risk in the district. So some pretty striking and upsetting statistics, really. Also, one of the most inadequate or deficient school facilities, just very lacking spatially for many, many reasons at Vaughan. Other schools with green check marks in these categories as well, but just going across that top line, opportunities to improve utilization and efficiency present themselves with this early action item. Other schools as well, and also one of the least energy efficient schools represented at Vaughan. When we developed this category, not limiting other options, the gray dots, Trainer, Sparks, Clayton, really Incline's kind of a one of a kind. But those 3 middle schools are on shared campuses with other 60-year-old elementary schools. So Trainer, Duncan, Sparks, Risley, Clayton, Tolles present some potential opportunities with that large a parcel that we didn't want to limit future opportunities. With Vaughn and Dilworth, really they're standalone campuses. So what you see is what you get. We also talked a little bit about that deferred maintenance. So when you've got 15 million just to deal with deferred maintenance, plus at least as much again to bring the facility up to a level of parity with our current standards, you start to get into that area where it may be more cost effective in the long run to actually start over in essence. And this is really what in part drew their attention to the middle schools. I mentioned Swope and O'Brien recently having these types of projects, major modernizations implemented on their campuses. We have not designed or constructed similar projects at the elementary or high school levels, in recent years. So the opportunity to potentially replicate what we did at Swope or what we did at O'Brien at one of these campuses is much more swift to market type of solution, whereas some of these options, hey, they warrant more study. It doesn't mean that they won't be near the top of the final report's recommendation, but we're just really not sure. From an engineering standpoint, take those Sheepshed Elementary schools, for example. That's going to likely be some form of architectural RFP. Like, there will have to be a creative solution and a more lengthy design process, which will be urgently engaged upon. But when we have potentially a design solution more at the ready at the middle school level, also brought this to light. Again, trying to balance the process with the urgent need and intermixing the available resources. So the next couple slides have to do with why not some of these other schools. I kind of described this, not to limit future scenarios, larger picture scenarios that are still under exploration. Not to minimize the needs of these schools in any way, but just to try to differentiate the most in need and the most shovel ready versus all of these schools. Mentioned on this slide the extreme underutilization at Incline Middle School. I think there are under 200 students, maybe even under 150, 6 through 8 at Incline Middle. So that left us really with Vaughn Middle School checking all of these boxes. We went through all of the deficiencies, the socioeconomic needs of that community, the age of that school, its standalone nature, and the engineering solutions that we have already implemented and their feasibility for application in this case. Led the consultant to make a strong recommendation to the Capital Funding Protection Committee and the school board to proceed with design phase to replace Vaughn Middle School on site with a new middle school similar in nature to what we reconstructed O'Brien with, for all the reasons that we really just went through. Again, not to minimize the needs of other schools, but really to try to bring this forward as soon as possible in the interest of urgency and need, but also with proper vetting that no amount of additional study or months of community discussion are likely at all to change this conclusion. So There were a couple of final steps just to brief the board and keep everyone abreast of this ongoing process. Really, late January into February and even March will probably heat up quite a bit more. In large part, not only are we going to be meeting with the community, a couple of stakeholder groups presenting to the board, we'll probably bring it back to this committee with interim updates, but we're going to speak more publicly and more specifically on some of these hypothetical scenarios. And so, when we engage the public esoterically, they're less apt to really turn their heads from their busy lives. But when we start talking about very specific scenarios, it's likely to elicit a strong reaction, and that's the point. We're not trying to, upset people, but this will unveil some bold, unprecedented recommendations and great opportunities. So that's going to play out over really February through April. And the main reason that I wanted to present this to you guys, of course, your awareness of the district and everything, but really the punchline is that these Vaughn project, as well as other recommendations that will come out of this study, will trigger rezoning evaluation consideration. Some of those scenarios are under development. Some of them may even be presented to the zoning committee this school year in 2023. As that one schedule slide suggested, the rebuilding of Vaughn would not be able to be completed until the 25-26 school year. So bringing a slate of proposed rezoning scenarios to this committee next fall, like the 23-24 school year, would not be out of line. But we, in part because of this early action, may well start talking about these scenarios as soon as next semester. If some of you remember, like when we opened other new middle schools, Desert Skies in particular comes to mind, there's a bit of a tail of, we used to call them cascading impacts, right? There's more capacity that's established at this location. You move some people into the new school, that creates capacity here, which allows you to move some people over here, and that sort of dominoes in a positive way throughout the community. Those are the types of scenarios that we worked through in 2017 and 2018 with this committee associated with those schools. And I see a number of those types of scenarios coming to light as a result of this study, actions to move forward on those projects that then will create opportunities that this committee is well positioned to sort of adjudicate with the public. It's a standing public committee that's used to considering these types of matters and helping guide the board. So it's not exactly a chicken and egg thing, but this is still a 10,000 foot level study. They're not going to prescribe specific solutions, but they will likely categorize degrees of improvement, prioritize the order in which they would recommend our investments proceeding, and then it will ultimately move through our Capital Funding Protection Committee to our school board to initiate these projects and work through the details. So I appreciate you listening to all that. This is exciting for us, and I think going to be really positive for the public, but it will involve a significant amount of change, which this committee's not unaccustomed to, and so I think back to that engagement part, the more that we can, keep the community engaged with what we're trying to do, they can have a voice and understand the decision making, because ultimately that change may be perceived as disruptive.
Thank you for that update, Adam. I have to say, in having the opportunity to attend a few of these meetings, we've had some Hug High students at these meetings, and the difference that they have mentioned in having a new school that has these facilities and these opportunities and just a different design, and And the fact that they know that the district invested in them, you can see it in them. They're proud and they're happy. And there's adjustment, right? Like, it's not perfect. There's definitely, a few gripes here and there, but I think overall, I love that this modernization study is giving our highest needs communities in Washoe County an opportunity to have new facilities and to have modern facilities, and this committee has spent a lot of time on the kind of surrounding areas, right? All the growth, but the older communities definitely deserve some time with this WC1 money, and it's exciting that it's getting there. So I'm excited about this. And I don't know if anybody's been into Vaughan Middle School in the recent 5 or 10 years, but I would agree this is a great first step with this project. So I'm excited about it. Martha, will you make sure everyone gets those public community meetings? I know you did a really good job at making sure everybody had a heads up on that. So if everybody on our committee could get those dates in January when Canon Design meets out in the community, that was really helpful, I think. Thank you. Any other comments, thoughts? All right, well, with that, we will close out with our final public comment for item 3.01.
Paulo Nava Duran.
Pablo, you're up.
Okay, so the new Vaughan Middle School.
Your mic's not on, Pablo.
I think that the new Vaughan Middle School is going to be very exciting for the students. For the current students currently have a 700, and the buildings. So the new building is going to have a 1,400 capacity. So this one sure be a need to rezoning for the next fall. Starting fall of 2023 of a rezoning. I know for the rezoning part of Vaughan Middle School, all the Vaughan Middle School, the feeder school are Ecolor Elementary School, Federal Elementary School, Walter Corbett Elementary School, and Libby Booth Elementary School all go to Vaughan Middle School, and all the buildings are 50 to 60. It built in 1950 to 60. The oldest one of Veteran in 1940. The new project will bring benefit for all these students in the central Reno area. I do live in the New World area. I live near Moana Lane, which is closer to next to Vaughan Middle School, zone for Vaughan Middle School, feet away from Vaughan Middle School area. I live in zone for Pine Middle School area. That bring excitement. So for the new Vaughan Middle School, someone need to have to rezone for it, and how you get from Vaughan. So all the Vaughan students go to Wooster High School, and then if you look at all the Wooster High School charts, if you show the charts, you see the Dawson Hen Valley go to Pine Middle School and then go to Wooster. I think that could create for a zoning. Could create a rezone back to Vaughan Middle School, where we recently, before the rezone from Vaughan to Pine Middle School, when they built a new Marcyhurst Elementary School, Marcyhurst Middle School, down in Air Creek, or maybe option 2, maybe rezone all the Smith Ridge area to Vaughan Middle School, which is next to it is a Pine Middle School. That's really difficult to tell, but it seems like for the map, it geologically makes sense to rezone all the Smith Street to Vaughan Middle School, but unfortunately we're next to Pine Middle School, so and then option 3 is rezone all the Midtown area to Vaughan Middle School, from Swope to Vaughan Middle School, and I got no time for it, so have a nice day.
Well, I think Pablo solved everything, so I don't know, we might be done. Okay, anything else for the good of the All right. We are still tentatively on for January, and Martha will let us know if we need to meet. But we do have some potential with this Vaughn, and then I know we've talked about the Spanish Springs area, so I don't know if the board will be ready for us to talk about that. So still, please keep it on your calendar for the third Thursday in January that we will be here. All right, we are adjourned at 7:13.